Of course, everybody knows we were supposed to start at 1 o'clock, and we had just adjourned, and I said from the floor that it would be 3 o'clock, but our quorum is 5. As you can count, we have 3 here right now. We had 4. We got 4. Okay, I thought you left. I'm sorry. So we need one more. In the meantime, there's a sign-up sheet here. Anybody that hadn't signed up that wishes to sign up can. The other announcement I'd like to make is Health and Human Services was supposed to be in here at 3 o'clock, and they've canceled their meeting. We've got 8 bills on here, and it's probably going to be a lengthy meeting. So if you're here for that committee, you don't need to stick around. I hope. I gotta. Okay, we got a quorum, so as soon as we get settled in here, we're going to begin. I always give a few instructions before we get started, and we got 8 bills. It's going to be timely. I appreciate if we could expedite it along. Last time we got in here, we were in here for a long time, and I don't know how many people we got up on the sign up, you know. But it's getting late in the day, and certainly I don't want to hurry us beyond looking at everything with good measure and making reasonable decisions. But if we've got a lot of sign-ups, I'd like to, and I'll announce that later, give a time limit. We said 3 minutes the other day, and after about an hour and 15 minutes and only 7 or 8 people had spoken, we didn't do very well with it. But before we get started, I'd like to ask Representative Williams to ask a prayer. '23? Yeah. Aren't you at 23?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. May we bow our heads. Thank you, dear Lord, for the days that you have granted us. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and work for the people of this great state of Georgia. Please help us weigh the decisions and be mindful of the decisions that we make. Please bless our troops in harm's way. Bless our peace officers as they go about their duties every day. In God's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Anybody else that just came in wish to sign up to speak? Okay, I'm gonna call the bills in order except for one. I have one person that's got 2 bills here, and I don't see any sense in skipping from one to the other. So when she comes up, I'm gonna let her do both of hers at the same time. But first bill up is substitute to House Bill 118, LC 411894S, Representative Morris. Please begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring to you today a substitute for House Bill 118. Best stated, this is a bill that's related to a term you may have heard before called swatting. And what it is putting an unlawful request for emergency services. We've had cases in our community where people have literally gotten off of an airplane and seen their homes on television, and it being reported that inside that home that the spouse and the children had been murdered. This was a case that happened in Alpharetta, I believe 2 years ago now, where a father and a mother go rushing to their home thinking that their children had been killed. And what happened is someone put in an emergency request, a false request, stated that there was a parent in the home that had killed the children. So what happens is the SWAT team shows up. Okay, and with that, they find out, of course, that has not happened. That was someone that put in a case. I believe they were actually out of country, and they phoned in that false request. In that case, it turned out fine. Everyone was scared to death. But in a case in Walker County in January of last year, there was a case where a ex-mother-in-law who had put in a telephone call related to her ex-daughter-in-law called the local sheriff's office, explained that she was going to kill the children and that they were in danger. The sheriff mobilizes, gets there. The ex-daughter-in-law's father happened to be there. He was hard of hearing, and by the time it was done, shots had been fired and that man had been killed. There was no reason at all for that gentleman to be killed. They were good citizens minding their own business. At the same time, we put good law enforcement officers in danger. We not only took them away from other duties, but we put them in the line of fire in a situation where they had to, unfortunately, engage with someone that did not understand what's going on. So currently on the books right now, if you put in a false claim for emergency service or a swatting call, that's a misdemeanor. We'd like to raise that to a felony. Now, we have been to subcommittee on this. We went back, we worked with the prosecutors association. We've met with the sheriffs, we've met with the police chiefs, we've met with public safety, and they're all in support of this bill. We are focusing certainly on intentional calls. We're not after someone that unintentionally, that good Samaritan that might put in a telephone call accidentally thinking that something was going on. They're protected under this, but it's certainly the person that is knowingly, that has no reasonable ground at all to put this call or to believe that this situation is arising. So what we're asking for you today is that if there is a situation where bodily harm or result of death from this false alarm, if bodily death or harm is caused, we're asking to increase the standards to a felony on that. And I certainly would entertain questions.
Do we have any questions? I would just add to it, it's quite an expensive endeavor when you call out a SWAT team and a lot of other people, and it costs the local government plus time away from other duties by police officers. So I'm certainly in support of it.
Thank you.
No questions? Have a motion to pass and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I assume we're ready to vote. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members.
Next up is House Bill 325. Representative Clark. Is he here? Moving on, we'll go to House Bill 338. Substitute to House Bill 338. Who is that? Representative Gravely.
Would you like for me to present here, or would you like me to?
You're fine right where you are.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 338 simply adds 2 members to the Georgia Standards and Training Council, the Firefighter Standards and Training Council. And the members that are being added, if you'll look on line 22, 1 member shall be the president of the Georgia State Firefighters Association for the length of the president's term. Line 24, 1 member shall be the president of the Georgia Association of Fire Chiefs for the length of the president's term. And that was amended from the subcommittee.
Number 23.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Gravely, this also includes the volunteer firemen. They're all covered under all of this, and all firefighters throughout the state of Georgia.
Actually, that's a great question. Majority of the membership in the Georgia Firefighters Association are volunteer firefighters. Georgia's, and depending on the year, anywhere from 33 to 34,000 certified Georgia firefighters. 70% of those firefighters are volunteers. So yes, sir, this would give them that voice at the table.
Great, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question.
Good bill.
Do we have any other questions? I'm ready. Let's, have a motion due pass. Second. Any further comments, questions? Hearing none, we're ready to vote. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. House Bill 394, substitute to House Bill 394. Who's that? Who's Earnhardt? Representative Earnhardt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring for your consideration House Bill 394, the Public Safety Ambassadors Bill. The purpose of House Bill 394 is to utilize the service of civilian law enforcement employees and volunteers to assist law enforcement officers with traffic control. Different police departments refer to these employees by different terms. Often they are called public safety ambassadors or citizens on patrol. These are uniformed support personnel. They are not armed. They do not have authority to detain, arrest, or issue citations. This bill requires that public safety ambassadors, I'll refer to them hereafter as PSAs, complete the exact same traffic control training as sworn law enforcement officers do. This training is approved by the Georgia Police Officers Standards and Training Council. Now, PSAs report directly to sergeants in the field and are dispatched to wherever they are needed to assist law enforcement with non-dangerous situations. This bill will authorize them to direct traffic, most notably in traffic accident situations where a PSA could take over directing that traffic and free up the officers to attend to more pressing injuries or more pressing issues, including injuries. Also at events where traffic may be heavy. Drivers on the road would be required to obey the directions of the PSAs. Now, failure to do so would be a violation, and although the PSA has no authority to issue a citation, he or she can report the violation to the law enforcement officer on duty, much in the way that a crossing guard would do. There have been some minor tweaks to the bill originally, and this is really solely for the purpose of opening this up to the sheriff's offices across the state so that they can participate in this program as well. Members of the committee, I believe this is a well-designed bill. It is a much-needed resource for our law enforcement officers. I would request your favorable consideration. I'm honored to have here today joining me Frank Rotundo from the Georgia Associations of Police Chiefs. This passed unanimously out of subcommittee. We had present at that time the Milton Dunwoody and police chiefs and my own hometown Marietta Police Chief Dan Flynn. It's a wonderful opportunity for people to get involved. I know that in the case of the Marietta Public Safety Ambassadors, they have 8. 4 of them have gone on to pursue careers as law enforcement officers. So once again, I ask for your favorable consideration, and I'm certainly open to any questions.
We have one question here, number 23 again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see you have the Commissioner for Post certification back there, Mr. Ken Vance, and this meets with post certifications. Good, thank you. That's what I need, is a thumbs up from my friend, my constituent, Ken Vance.
Do we have any other questions? I didn't ask it last time. I've got the sign-up list, but if anybody in the audience has anything that they would like to contribute, even though they haven't signed up. We have a motion to pass. And a second. Do we have any further questions? Hearing none, assume we're ready to vote. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
And since Representative Earnhardt's still up there, she has House Bill 459. I've called her Ms. Earnhardt for a long time. I
Okay.
have a problem calling her representative, but House Bill 459.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, members of the committee, I present to you House Bill 459, the School Bus Driver's License Verification Bill. I'm honored to have present with us here today Public Safety Commissioner Mark Madonna, sitting behind me, as well as Major Johnny Jones, who is Director of Motor Carrier Compliance Division. Currently in Georgia, when city and county school districts hire a school bus driver, they check the validity of the applicant's commercial driver's license to verify that it is in good standing. After that employee is hired, there is currently no requirement that that driver's license is ever checked again. No periodic check to determine if a school bus driver's license has been expired or, worse, suspended, which could occur for any number of reasons, including traffic violations or a DUI conviction. House Bill 459 seeks to set in place a requirement that school bus drivers' licenses are periodically checked to determine that they are still valid. The school board would submit the names and driver's license numbers of its bus drivers to the Department of Public Safety. Those licenses would then be electronically verified through the Department of Driver Services in coordination with the Georgia Technology Authority. The school board will then be notified if any of its school bus drivers' licenses are expired or have been revoked or suspended. This would be done twice a year, in July prior to the start of the school year, and again in December before the start of second semester. Should a driver's license become suspended, that driver also is required to report that suspension to the school board. In the event that a driver's license is found to be expired or suspended, the school board would then revoke the employee's authorization to operate a school bus. It would then be up to the discretion of that school board whether to reinstate that authorization under the proper circumstances. Say, for example, a license is expired and then the driver renews it and it comes into good standing. That would be up to the school board to reinstate that. Ladies and gentlemen, this again, I believe, is a very good bill designed to keep our school children safe as they travel to school and to and from school on school buses. I certainly ask for your favorable consideration. I'm also open to any questions.
Thank you. Number 24.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. You indicated that the license check would show if it had been suspended. Would it show other offenses such as speeding or reckless driving or something?
Right. Specifically, what this is they are running a check on the validity of the driver's license. It is not a check on the driver's history. However, if the license has been suspended, and actually Commissioner McDonough may be able to speak better to this, but as I understand, if it has been suspended, you will see the reason for that suspension. So if it's if it's been suspended for reckless driving or DUI, that would be an indication. But if the driver's license is valid, it will not be showing. This is not they're not running a check on the driver's driver history. You would not see all previous.
May I follow up?
Certainly.
Do we do any other type of criminal background on bus drivers?
It's a really good question, and I would have to maybe perhaps defer that to maybe Frank Rotundo, who's here as well. I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to speak to it, Frank? My sense is I know several counties that do run background checks on school bus drivers, and they run histories, drivers' histories prior to hiring. I don't know whether they run them on a routine basis. A lot of companies run them on a routine basis every 3 or 5 years. They run drivers' histories because they're concerned that for the safety and well-being of commercial vehicles or school buses. So that's satisfactory. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if one of the school bus drivers got a DUI over the weekend, that's not going to show up. That school bus driver could continue driving with a DUI?
Technically, I suppose the answer to that is yes. If that driver's license is suspended as a result of that DUI, that driver is required in this law to report that suspension to the school district. And certainly that then puts the onus on the employee to do that. It is possible that they could pass an inspection or a check in July, and then let's say they get a DUI in September. Let's say they're a driver. I don't know the duration of time, but let's say then in October their driver's license is suspended. They are required by law to report that suspension to the school board. But the automatic check would be done twice a year.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'd like to note that there are some city and county school districts that do choose to run periodic checks on on driver's license. There's just nothing uniform, no standard set, no state mandate to do that.
And if I might, many of them have requirements, written requirements when they are hired, that if they become involved in anything like that, they're supposed to bring it forward. Of course, like any criminal enterprise, for lack of a better word, typically people don't come forward and admit guilt.
Right, and I think that's one of the intentions of this bill,
Sure.
is that if you have someone who opts not to report that, at least then we know that every 6 months we have an opportunity to catch that.
And in some communities, the law enforcement personnel may even notify the school board, or in smaller
Right.
communities, everybody knows about it, and
Yeah.
it gets addressed pretty rapidly.
Right.
So, any further questions? Any questions from anybody in the audience? We have a motion to pass and a second. Any further comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries.
Thank you.
I'm gonna skip Alan's. Did he come in? Okay, we're gonna go back. Representative Clark's here now, so, House Bill 325. And you're welcome to do it, from up here if you want. $16,
Yes, sir.
okay.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I have House Bill 325, it's LC 411808, and we are passing out an amendment now, but I'll explain the bill and then explain the amendment. The bill, during the appropriations process, the Post Council made a request in the amended fiscal year 2019 budget for $1.2 million to scan and upload records regarding post-investigation or complaints and investigation files. So that led us to ask some questions about how long are you having to keep these files, because that seems like a lot of money just to scan documents. How many files are we talking, how many documents are we talking about? And because they're running out of actual physical storage space for paper copies of these files. And it come to find out with some investigation with Legislative Council, they're required to hold these records for 50 years. And so all this bill does is it reduces on any case that has been an investigation that's been concluded by the council, it's requiring them to hold those records for 30 years. So even if no fault was found or anything, it's requiring them to hold those records for 30 years so that to free up some of the space. And going forward, what we've talked about doing as far as uploading those documents is kind of the new complaints that come in. There'll be digital copies, and then also any kind of investigation that goes back on some of these files that they get uploaded as needed to save the taxpayer some money. But the amendment was something that council presented in subcommittee. We didn't have legislative council there to draw it up, so I met with them after the subcommittee. I do think it's a good idea, and that just simply says that records may be destroyed, that if before the 30-year time frame is up, if the officer is deceased or if it was a no action upon the complaint. So some kind of complaint that they're not even opening up an investigation. They get the complaint and it's just ruled that there's no action needed, that instead of having to have space for that they'll be able to destroy that because it wasn't an investigative, and no investigation was opened up on that complaint. So that's the bill and that's the amendment, and I'm open for any questions.
Do we have any questions? Do we have a motion? We have a motion to pass. Second. And a second. You want to present the amendment in accordance with Robert's rules? Yes.
However you feel like, yes,
Oh,
yes,
yeah,
sir. We
yeah.
need to vote on the amendment.
And I'll be glad to read it, or if you want to read it.
Okay, you want to read it, Legislative Council? Well, I'll read it. Here's the amendment. Replacing, all right, I'll just read it. It's easier than trying to. So amend House Bill 325, LC 41-1808 by replacing line 6 with the following. Provide for destruction of such records to provide for an exception to provide for related matters to repeal conflict. And then by replacing line 18 with the following. Council and then such records may be destroyed, provided, however, that the council shall have the authority to destroy such records prior to such 30 years, where such officer is deceased and no action upon the complaint was taken by the council beyond the council's initial intake of such complaint. That's the amendment.
Any discussion from the members on the amendment? At this time, is there a second? I have a second. Let's back up a minute. Number 24.
Thank you. Just a quick question. It says if the officer is deceased, should there be a time limit? I mean, what if the officer died and it's immediately you destroy records? Should there be some time limit then before you decide it? I know you're saying the 30 years, you're not going to wait 30 years anymore, but if there's a deceased, would there be some?
Well, there's not going to be any action available to take on that officer.
Yeah, but there could be public liability. Sorry, but I'm not sure. Thank you.
He can speak to that.
Yes, ma'am. In those cases where there may be some public liability, and there are some from time to time, then what this would allow us to do is we work very much hand in hand with the Attorney General's office to make sure that any of those records that may have some liability attached to them down the road, that we will keep those records as well. Yes, ma'am.
Number 28.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a follow-up. So if an officer passes away, from that date that he passes away to 30 years later, we keep these files?
We're keeping the files currently We're keeping the files currently for 50 years, regardless
Right.
of if he's dead or alive. It's just open for 50. I mean, they're maintained. The case could be closed, but the files are having to be maintained for 50 years. This would just move it back to 30 unless the officer has is deceased. Then they can be destroyed upon what the director was talking about.
If an officer passes away during an investigation, my question is this. And that officer passes away. So if there's a case going on right now, what's the time frame do we destroy these records?
Well, the way I'm reading the amendment, the word "and" on line 7, deceased and no action, it would be if there is a complaint that no action was deemed necessary and the person is deceased. It's joining both of those statements together. So the officer is deceased and no action upon the complaint was taken, then the file can be it's before the 30 years.
But the officer is deceased and some action is being taken. But
Then
the officer,
it would not be destroyed at that point because it's an and not an or on line 7. I'm not a
Representative
lawyer,
Vance?
or an English. I'm
It
not
just
an
needs
English
some
major or a
clarity.
lawyer.
Ma'am, you asked a very good question. If an investigation is going on and the officer dies while the investigation takes place, it will be at least 30 years before that record is destroyed.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
You know, I had questions about this early on when I saw it, about 30 years. I could imagine they kept them that long. As long as I've been involved in this, I had no idea there was a 50-year requirement. Are these kept electronically?
No, sir, not all of them. We've got over 6,000 boxes of records in archives right now, and plus what you know that we have in our office. So we think we can reduce just our records today, Mr. Chairman, by about a fifth with the no action cases and those where officers are deceased.
And going forward, they'll probably all be electronic. won't they?
Correct. That's what we're doing now. Yes, sir.
And see, I had a bill a couple of years ago about the video cameras and the cost of maintaining that for Cobb County Police Department was $100,000 a year for maintaining those records. So I just can't imagine the number that you have as compared to just the videos that they have.
1.5 million.
Yeah, see, it's a significant amount of money for the taxpayer to bear. And I don't know what we keep them beyond 30 years to 50 for. That's
Open records.
number 28.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, do we know how many jobs this is that we might be losing?
Jobs.
Yes, for records.
Well, somebody's still gonna have, well, sorry.
I don't think Post Council is going to lose any jobs. Having served on there for 12 years, I can tell you that business is thriving.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is that it, Mr. Vance? Okay, is there any other questions? Somebody want to second it again? We have a second. I assume we're ready to vote. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The amendment carries. Now, there's a motion and a second on board. Shall this bill now pass as amended by Representative Clark? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. Motion carries as amended. So, thank you, Mr. Vance. Well, we've got two bills left and the author for one of them in here, so, okay, well, we'll call the other one first, and, but neither one of them's here, so I said I would stand in for one. House Bill 417, and the simple title is Law Enforcement Officers and Agencies Comprehensive Regulation of Trauma Scene Cleanup Services. We heard this bill last year. It passed unanimously. It went through rules. It was voted on, I think, unanimously in the House. It went to the Senate, and it was on, it wasn't called for the Senate Public Safety Committee on the last day, and it died. So I think we have one person signed up to speak to it, Les Snyder. Sure. You, the expert here.
Members of the committee, my name is Les Schneider, and yes, I've worked on this bill a couple of years, and I'm hoping this will be the year it will be done. But basically what this bill provides for is when people are at their most fragile, when there's been a suicide or a murder in a home or whatever, and there has to be the cleanup of that terrible tragedy, that we make sure that when people are most fragile, that we are protecting them the most. This bill basically provides that, number one, there'll be a list of companies that will be so authorized on a GBI website. Number two, the companies have to have bonded, so in case of any theft of things from the home, and a surety, so to make sure there's background checks of the people involved. I pointed out in the subcommittee that I've had 2 incidences in my life where my best friend killed himself and a neighbor was murdered. And in both those cases, when the people came in to clean up, they stole personal possessions from people and hurt them when they were at their weakest. This weekend, I got an email where a person's father had died and no one checked on the person, and 10 days later, they finally discovered it, and the people who came and cleaned up put his remains in a garbage pail. And as the man said to the other company that came and really fixed things. He says, you know, my father's not trash, and this is not the way people should be treated. So I would ask you to please vote this bill forward. It has had a favorable decision over in the Senate, but I just want to make sure that we can continue this and make sure that we actually protect people and not have people's horrible situations put on Facebook or anything like that. So I'd ask for your favorable support, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I think we have some comments here from the vice chairman. As many of you know, he was the mayor of Villa Rica for years and dealt with the police department and fire department, and they all came under his purview. Plus, he owns a funeral home, and he's dealt with these issues many times, and he spoke to it last year, and I think he would like to speak to it again.
Yes, I just want to just commend Mr. Snyder for his work on this. I think my colleague to my right here, Representative Williams, would agree that during these times, these families are very vulnerable, and I think we all agree on that. But one thing I want to bring to the committee's attention is, you know, any industry in our state that deals with biohazardous medical waste is licensed or is, you know, has some type of vetting process done to make sure that they know how to properly deal with this. And this is one of those industries that's just been flying below the radar. And unfortunately, we hear of the worst cases that kind of come up to the surface. And just like Mr. Snyder has given testimony in previous years and in this year, that we have to have some type of regulation, not overbearing bureaucratic regulation, but this is a step in the right direction to make sure that people understand that they can't come in with a latex glove that they buy at Family Dollar with a box of you know, hefty trash bags, and then, you know, get paid to do a job and go down to the local landfill and throw this stuff away, because that's what's happening in many cases. So this is a way to bring accountability and credibility to a niche, if you would, in our state that definitely needs that oversight.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I almost said for my 40 years, but then I had to stop and count. It's been 50 years that I've been in the funeral profession, and I have seen many, many instances as you've described, and even some much worse. I endorsed this legislation, and I was a co-signer last year. I believe in it, and I thank you for bringing this, and I thank you for your hard work, and I echo the sentiments of Representative Jay here, Collins, and I have flashbacks of incidences, and excuse me for that brief pause there, Representative Collins. This terrible scenes go through your head, but I thank you very much for this, and I wholeheartedly endorse it at proper time. I'd like to make a motion to adopt.
Okay, we got one more question, number 25. Is that
That's me, thank you, sir. I just wanted to know, has there been any changes since last year's version?
I think there might be one word where we took the word location and just put the word trauma scene, which is defined in the bill as a location that would be covered under this bill. So that's the only change.
Okay, great, thank you.
number 27?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one question I was wondering, Mr. Snyder, how do people get in touch with these companies? Who refers them when a family is going through an episode like that?
That's probably one of the biggest problems. That it's hard to look up in the phone book what to do, and that's why one of the genesis of the bill was to make sure there would be a list on the GBI website. In the past, what's happened to some extent is that sometimes local folks, either a coroner or a sheriff or whatever, would try to find somebody who might be able to do this work well, but there had been some nefarious practices where people were trying to give finder's fees and things like that for that, and that's what part of this bill is trying to fight against. And this way a reputable sheriff or a reputable coroner will be able to go to a list of companies that meet the criteria that we've talked about in this bill, and I feel that the public is much better protected that way.
Thank you for bringing this bill.
Thank you.
Number 26.
Yes, sir, I appreciate it, Chairman. I'm been a coroner for 18 years. I've been in the coroner business 15 years. Deputy coroner, excuse me, before that. So it's been in my life a long time. I'm like Jay and Rick, been in the funeral business. We've seen this trauma.
Right.
And it is very, very traumatic. But that was a great question about where do we get the information. Sometimes they do come to coroners, and
Right.
people will just send us cards, tell us, but we had no way to verify how good or bad they were.
That's right.
And at times, in a small town like mine, we do it ourselves. We take
Right.
care of the cleanup
That's
for families because we knew them.
Right.
But this is going to be a great help if we got these folks where we know who we're dealing with and they're going to handle it in a professional way. So I commend you what bed I've seen, and I know the others have told me how this had worked and gone through. It's a great bill. It's going to help local coroners when they do suggest somebody, they're going to be good at who they suggested. So I thank you for that.
Well, again, the House has been wise 2 years in a row. The Senate's been a little slow, but I'm hopeful that now this will become a reality and we'll be able to protect people again when they're most fragile.
Well, it's very much needed. It's very crucial.
Number 28.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you just go over the penalties again so I can understand? I see the $25,000 and I see $100,000.
Oh, the $25,000 is a surety bond that the company would have to have, and the $100,000 is the liability insurance that they would have to maintain if they're going into someone's home, and that goes to the issue of stealing personal, effects and things like that, and to also, if they do the kind of poor job that I described earlier, there would be some cause of action and be able to do this. No one is trying to keep anyone out of the business if they want to do it correctly. And I can tell you that there's a list of at least 30 companies who have endorsed and want this bill. Some of those companies don't even do this type of cleanup, but as the previous question indicated, they would like to be able to refer it to a company who knows how to handle it. And that's why even companies that aren't in this business that just do general cleanup want to have that. If you don't have the license, there is a fine, and it would be a misdemeanor on that, and there could be action taken against them. So it is, again, we put the threshold at the $25,000 or the $100,000, not at such a high level as to keep anybody out of the business who was sincerely wanting to do it correctly. But to your point, there are even companies that are out of state that they may get a call to do a job. Well, they're not going to come from Indiana to Georgia to do it, but if they had somebody to call in Georgia who was on this list, then they feel comfortable doing the referral. Right now, they're really hesitant to do it because they don't want the liability that they've referred it to somebody who doesn't do it correctly.
And is that each occurrence, that $100,000?
The $100,000 would be the liability policy for that cleanup. That's
For that
correct.
okay.
That's correct.
Thank you.
And if they steal the family jewels, so to speak, and it goes on that, the company still could be sued in excess of that, but at least there's insurance coverage, at least for the $100,000.
Thank you.
Number 23 again.
Apologize to Representative Mathis. I didn't see him sitting down there, but I know he and I share the same kind of seniority over young Representative Collins. I think we've been around a lot longer, but the mileage is there. But again, I hope that the GBI can spread this list through not only the coroners but other local law enforcement. And I know that our funeral homes have been notified by trauma scene cleanup crews that are here in Georgia. And I hope that they will spread the list to everyone and make it available to everyone. But it is a good bill, and I thank you very much. At the proper time, I'll make a motion.
Do we have any other questions? Anybody in the audience would like to speak to it? It's the proper time. We have a motion to pass. Do we have a second? Second. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next up is House Bill 487, Representative Bonner, LC 441015.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for hearing the bill today. As you mentioned, House Bill 487. This is a bill that we passed out of the House last session. It did not make it out of the Senate. But this addresses the Disaster Volunteer Relief Act. And it addresses state employees that are members of the Civil Air Patrol. So this bill amends that act and includes state employees who are members of the Civil Air Patrol. These employees would receive up to 15 days paid leave in a 12-month period to participate in disaster relief. Now, this leave would only be granted for a named disaster and only with the permission of the employee's department head and in conjunction with the Georgia Emergency Management and Homeland Security Department. Leave under the article is only granted for disasters within Georgia or a contiguous state of which we have a reciprocal agreement. As you may know, the Civil Air Patrol is an auxiliary of the United States Air Force. They provide vital services during disasters, and we are looking to give them the same status that we currently provide state employees who volunteer with the Red Cross. And one additional item, Mr. Chairman, is just for expedience sake, I would like to offer a slight amendment to this current LC. And that amendment would be on line 8 to, prior to the words Disaster Volunteer Relief Act, would be to add the name Robert Argo. So in fact, we would be renaming this act the Robert Argo Disaster Volunteer Relief Act. Robert Argo, as some of you may know, is a former State House member who passed away in 2016. He was also a member of the Civil Air Patrol during World War II and performed extremely well in that role and was in fact a part of a group that was recognized for that action in World War II and received as a part of a group a Congressional Gold Medal of Honor in 2014. And so as a means to honor him as a former colleague and then to also just frankly give this what would be a fairly mundane act a little pizzazz. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll entertain questions.
And I have a question. I've just perused it pretty quick here, but it's the first time I've seen it, and I don't see anything in here. I may be mistaken about the department having a decision about whether or not they can grant this leave.
If we look on line 30.
Okay, I see it now. Upon the approval of that employees agency and coordinated, okay,
Correct, yes, sir.
okay. Number 21.
You think the governor would sign that?
We are certainly hope that he'll have some influence at home that may encourage him to do so.
Any other questions? Any comments from anybody in the audience? Okay, we're going to do this again like we did the first time with the amendment. Do we have a motion? We have a motion to pass. We have a second? Second. Now we're going to go number 14.
That's me, Mr. Chairman. FYI, what we'll do is create a new section 1, and the new section 1 will say this act shall be known and may be cited as the Robert Argo
Disaster Volunteer Relief Act.
Disaster Volunteer Relief Act. And that's because the line 8 is part of the title, and that can't change. So, yes.
You're fine with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, do we have a second on the amendment? Second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Now to the motion. Shall this bill now pass as amended by Representative Clark? Bonner. Got too many Clarks. We have a motion do pass. Do we have a second? Second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, we got 3 Clarks now.
One too many.
Okay, we're down to the last bill, and I see Representative Dollar here. It's, let me get straight here. I got all of them piled up. House Bill 469. There we go, Representative Dollar.
Thank you, Chairman, and apologize for my voice. It's the remnants of a cold from last week. Also thank the Chairman for delaying me. I was a little tardy getting here. I was held up in Ways and Means presenting another bill.
We've had about 3. Everybody's all over the place today.
I
with,
appreciate the members
meetings.
being here. I think they're all probably like me and supposed to be in 2 other places right now as well. So thank you all for being here for this. HB 469 is really a result of, I think, some personal and cumulative frustration that's going on out there, Mr. Chairman. I called up the industry lobbyist about, I would say 2 years ago, to express some frustration I had. It wasn't personal, but it was a friend who was, you know, something happens, everybody, what do? They call us. And that happened, and I said, well, having felt the sting personally, I felt, you know, double obliged to try to do something about it. I was, at the time, I was told that the industry recognized that they needed to kind of do some self-addressing of the issues out there, and that that those issues would be mightily addressed in last year's session. Some attempt was made. I think a lot of you probably sat through hours of testimony, and there was no, in the end, nothing happened. So this year I decided to bring about a bill, and I can go through the bill with the committee and chairman. First off, this bill does not impact local governments, counties, and cities in their ability to contract to do this. This deals pretty much primarily with private property, and it does set up some fairly strict restrictions to that end. It sets up a registration process, which is new for this industry. Currently, towers are have to register and are regulated. Booters are not. It says that, and it lays out the guidelines by which they must register. It says that they can only operate in a jurisdiction that allows them to operate. That's a key matter. And if they will go to lines 34 and 38, it says that, and this is one of the I guess the key points of the bill. It says that they can only clip a car if a tow firm has been contacted and has evaluated the situation, and then they cannot tow the car. This is, again, only dealing for private property. And I should also mention, since we're on the topic, that universities, private technical schools, vocational schools, and colleges are exempt out of this as well. It has a couple of other things in there, such as setting a maximum fee of $65, release within 1 hour. This is something else that's new that's not going on currently, is that they have to accept form in the form of payment or credit card. I mean, a cash or credit card, and they have to provide you with a receipt. We heard testimony in subcommittee that a lot of what is going on is that this is cash. Some of the situations are borderline extortion, and that virtually zero of this money is subject to tax. It sets up standards for signage on these lots and on these properties. It says that a operator must contract with a condo, or they must contract with the private property owner or manager. They must contract with the condo or the apartment where they're going to operate, and that there can be no gratuity between the booter and the property owner. A lot of these things sound like kind of common sense stuff, Chairman. You know, there's such as, you know, standard things like insurance requirements. Along with a $60 max fee, there is a $25 per day after that 24 hours that they're allowed to charge. And I think that pretty much covers the highlights of the bill. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that are out there.
Mr. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, Chairman Dollar, thank you for bringing this bill. I worked extensively on this issue last year, and it was a very valuable learning experience to me as a legislator because I worked on it, and then I wound up being the only person to vote against the proposed bill after the committee, in their infinite wisdom, added a few things that I didn't necessarily think was fair and liked it. So that was a lesson for me. And I think everyone who sits on this committee would like to see something done to help regulate this industry. And what I want to suggest is that before we put, there's some good people in the booting business that do it right. And there are some really bad apples in this industry, and we hear a lot about those bad apples. But I think that we would be rushing to judgment to try to come up with some type of legislation in one legislative year, maybe two, that applies to this industry and overregulates this industry, because private property rights are very important to me. I know they are to a lot of members of this body. And one of my suggestions would be is we've got it late into this session, and this bill has been proposed, and I think it lacks the vetting process that it needs. But I would like to see a study committee put together over the next year to look at this and see if we can't come up with a way to regulate it like we do the towing industry. As far as the financial impact on that person that gets booted, I think it's still going to be cheaper to issue a boot than it is to have a car towed. And to me, logistically speaking, if I have parked illegally somewhere, I'd much rather be able to meet somebody in an expeditious, length of time and pay that, where it's cash or check, whatever it may be, and get my car back than to have to Uber somewhere to a lot and get my car back, or have to Uber home. So I think there are some advantages to having private property owners use a booting process versus towing. It's just that we need some time to come up with a plan that, quite frankly, some of the good folks that are booting and doing it right are happy with, and some of the things that we could do that property owners would accept, but that the general public out there would be protected in a way that we all want to protect them. So that's just my comments to you.
Number 27.
I'll reply real quick, real briefly. Representative, there, I asked how many operators there are out there. The answer I got was somewhere between 100 and 200. And I said, out of those, how many are the good guys? 5 was the answer I got. I think that to put this off for another year, because it was posed to me if I would want to do a study committee. I would prefer to see some regulation, some very tight guardrails put on this industry now. I have committed to work with the other side. I would like to get this bill out this year. I'd like to get it through the House as is. And I've committed to try and work through some of the differences over in the Senate. But right now, and I think we'll hear testimony from some people that can tell you that there's a lot of bad stuff going on out there, and this is, a lot of people are being abused, intimidated, and even killed over this issue, so.
Number 27.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Dollar, in the cost, did you say it was $60 and then $25 a day?
It was, the fee structure was $65, and then after you pay that, they have to release it within the hour. After that 24 hours, they could charge up to $25 a day.
Storage.
Yep.
Okay.
In a sense, I mean, you can have
You have their
access to it.
equipment. You have their equipment, yeah.
28.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Dollar, how do I know whether a tow company was called before I got booted? Is there a sticker or something on my car to let me know that we called this tow company, they came out, they couldn't move your car, so they got booted.
Well, under this legislation, Representative, they would, the property owner would have to call the tower, and then the tower would have to sign a form saying that they can't tow the car for a variety of reasons. It's, there's a low ceiling, they can't get over a ditch or something. And then if you go further in the legislation, if your car is booted, they're required to put a sticker on your window to say, how to contact them. So both of those steps have to take place for you to get booted. Again, on private property.
Thank you, I don't like booters.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? If not, we have several people who's, number 23. Okay, we've got several people signed up here that would like to speak to it, and unlike some of the other chairmen, I just go down the list, not whether they're for or opposed. So I go down by the order in which they signed up. So first one is Michael DePriest from Eagle Parking Company. Right, there's your choice, whichever one you want. Okay.
Thank you very much for letting me speak. I've been with Eagle Parking about 3 years. I've used them for service. I've been in restaurants for about 20 years in Atlanta, and I've used their service valet side, and I'm also now running the company as the COO of Eagle Parking. We have different valet accounts all throughout Atlanta, different pay-to-park operations as well. I've read through this bill. I'm reading it as not a regulation. This is completely banning booting, just the way how the process is, where how you have to call and approve it, and if they cannot tow, then we decide. By then, that person that did not pay or parked illegally obviously is going to go free from the lot. There's numerous companies, hundreds of companies in the city that in the state that run pay-to-park operations that do it the right way. Booting is one way that they go through and audit these lots the proper way. They do accept cash or credit card. We've used them for many, many years, and they're our partner in business. Now, if there's a car that's there for over, say, 3 days, we go to that towing option. There's numerous lots where logistically you cannot tow the vehicle. And booting is a lot cheaper than towing. Like Representative Collins suggested, you're going to pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars from a tow than paying $75 for the booting. This is the only way that we can really enforce our lots. There's not enough towing trucks to get around to tow every single vehicle that's free to park. So booting is the way to go. We've had no issues. They get along with our restaurants, all their partners in the business. One thing that's going to affect if this bill was passed is the 911 calls. Just think how many they're going to increase. When you go out and go find your car and it's gone, what are you going to do first? You're going to call 911. My car has been stolen. It's not. It was towed, and you'll never know because it's going to be gone. That's a problem that needs to be looked at. The suggestion of having a study group for this, do I agree? There's always some things we can do better. Absolutely. But from our standpoint, from Eagle Parking, it works. Of course, there's always different opinions about better signage. We listen to people's feedback. Of course, we can do better. But I think we're making a knee-jerk reaction to go ahead and move this forward. There's a lot of things where this is a ban. This is not a regulation, the way this reads. We had a city meeting last year, and there was hundreds of people that showed up for that meeting about this bill or about something very similar to it. And there's a lot of feedback from different apartment complexes, different owners, parking companies like Laz, Lanier, all those represented, and pretty much had a very similar opinion like I had that really need to be heard on this topic. Then we're not talking about the hundreds of employees that will lose their jobs that work in park enforcement. Good people that have been doing it for a long, long time that honestly, they're the kind of individuals that struggle to find jobs anywhere else. And they excel. And there's a good people that have done it for years and years that have bought homes in this state that do the right thing. and it's a different kind of job, but it really needs to be done to really regulate parking, and so we can run our business. And all these parking companies will struggle, and we will also lose employees because of this, because we'll have to increase rates, and rates will double, triple just to cover the cost that we'd have to regulate and get different towing companies out. I'm good.
Do we have any questions for the gentleman? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Next is Jeff Phillips from Advanced Booting.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Jeff Phillips. I own Advanced Booting Services. We also represent the Georgia Parking Enforcement Coalition. I was here actually last year in front of y'all. We did try to get some legislation passed. Unfortunately, we got derailed on that. We came to you because we were looking for regulation in our industry. We wanted consistent signage. We wanted more transparency. We wanted something similar to what the tow industry enjoys, so that people know when they pull in a parking lot, no matter what area in Georgia you're in or what city you're in, what the rules are and who's doing the enforcement out there. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of misinformation spread around. Yeah, there are some bad apples in my industry. I'll admit to that. That's why we came to you last year. Most recently, there's been some in DeKalb County. I actually went down and spoke in front of them. We were fortunate enough to get a new ordinance there, and it was for some of the reasons that Mr. Dollar here was talking about, where guys are only taking cash and charging absorbent amounts of money. Well, that's why we came to you all last year to try to get some legislation here, was to become a better industry. We want to weed out the bad apples. I mean, all of our crews that we represent here, all my guys wear body cameras, so do the other companies that are represented here. We all carry insurance, and yes, we take credit cards, we most certainly pay taxes. I would say 80 to 90% of our transactions are done with credit card or debit card. Nobody walks around the city of Atlanta hardly with $75 in their pocket. It's just not seen. A couple of the problems here, we're okay with the registration processes. We definitely want that. My problem with this bill, and this bill does admit to a ban here, they have to call a property owner or a parking company is going to have to call a tow company, and they're going to have to sign a form. Well, you're not using legislation here. You're using our sister industry of parking enforcement to kind of regulate where we work and how we work. The other thing that wasn't mentioned in the bill here description is, let's say the tow company comes out and they sign that form. Well, now we have to write a letter, certified letter, to the owner of the vehicle. Currently, it's illegal for us to get that information. Only tow companies can have that. I used to own a tow company in Miami. We could get that information because we actually physically take possession of your car. We'll hang on to that car, and if it goes beyond a certain amount of time, depending on the state law, we can actually take possession and own that vehicle. That's why we need the DMV records, and then sell it. A booting company would be illegal to get that information. Personally, I don't want it. Also, even after we send that letter out, it's 30 days before we can boot the car. So 30 days, that car that can't be towed for whatever reason is occupying space on one of my clients' lots, whether there be a parking company or a property owner or a mall. They can't have that car booted for 30 days following receipt of that letter. That's kind of heavy. I mean, you're really hamstringing these property owners and property management companies there. I just don't feel that's the way to do things on that at all. The tow industry's been around for a lot of years. They've had their incidents, their black eyes on them, just as we have. But regulation and legislation has cleaned up that whole business right there. And that's what we were looking to do last year, and we'd love to do it again this year. Like I said, we got derailed. We would love the opportunity to work with you folks and craft a good law so that we can enjoy some of the same benefits that the towing industry has and get the regulation. We're not opposed to that. I mean, we carry insurance, like I said. We use body cameras. Towing company doesn't do that. We have a great relationship, my company, with APD, because we use the same Axon body cameras as they do. If an officer pulls up and says, hey, what's going on here? My guys literally hand them their cell phone. It's got the same app that the police department uses. They pull up, they can see their body camera, see the exchange. We provide receipts. All of our companies put stickers on the windows. All of us take credit cards. And we're a much more legitimate business than a lot of folks seem to think. Another point that's often brought up to in the misinformation is that tow companies don't pay their drivers by commission. Well, first of all, not all booting companies pay their guys by commission. There are several companies that pay an hourly rate to go out there and work and do their job. Every tow company, including the one I used to own, pays by commission. You have a drop fee if you show up and the person comes back while you're still hooking it. If you pick the car up, take it back to the yard, there's a second fee or a higher fee. So they're absolutely paid on commission, and I know that's been brought up several times here by certain folks here when they're trying to be a little bit misleading on what happens. Like I said, we've definitely had some problems in our industry. We would definitely like to clean up on our industry, and we can do that through proper legislation. I just don't feel this is the legislation. This is basically a ban. This is going to put us out of business in the state of Georgia. And it's really, and I mean, no love lost for the booting industry. I realize it with a lot of folks, but the effect on property owners, property management companies, and parking companies is going to be huge, because it's going to leave them with one option, and that's to tow. So their towing is going to go through the roof. Also, 911 services are going to get abused by just the same thing my colleague said previously. Everybody that comes out, if your car is not there, you're pulling out your cell phone, you're calling 911. As a tow operator, I have to let the police department know every time we tow a car. And we do that because that's the law, but it has to be done so that when 911 gets the call, they can say, yeah, it wasn't stolen, contact XYZ Towing, here's their number, go find it. So the option of booting is a much softer hand. I mean, we're trying to clean up the industry. We're trying to do the right thing out there. Most of our companies that are represented here today, we do that inside and out every day. At least we try to do our best. Weeding out the bad apples, that's what we'd love to do. And I think proper legislation can do that, and you can help us do that. But unfortunately, this amounts to just a ban. And we're going to be hurting not just the booting industry and all the people we employ, but all of our clients are going to suffer as a result of it too. And as the gentleman pointed out, if they don't have proper enforcement and they can't recapture their lost parking fees, they have to spend more money. That comes down to the consumer. So everybody here is going to be spending more to park and use the services. So.
Any questions for number 18?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you guys for being here. And I want a balance. I know there's going to be some folks that are going to be speaking, I guess, in favor of the bill. But here's what makes it very, very hard. There was a group of us that were at Krog City Market just the other night, just having dinner, right down the way here.
Not sure where that is, but okay.
Just right around the street, okay. And it was a gravel dirt area just right across from the parking lot, and it was well signed. Everything was perfect. I'd say probably it was a lot that probably could have held 40, 50 cars max. There were probably 10 in that lot. The gentleman one of the guys that we were out with, just kind of having dinner, got an alert on his phone that his time was about to run out, and so he re-upped for another hour. We went about, talking and eating dinner, and got out there, and his car was booted. He was like, well, wait a minute. I checked his phone. We called the attendant, and he was like, I re-upped it. It took the transaction for him to do his phone took 5 minutes. He was alerted, hey, your time's running out. He re-upped it. He paid for another hour. The boot was put on at the 3rd minute. That was extremely frustrating. So he was a paying customer. We was parking. We were eating dinner there. He was, paid for his parking. He re-upped it for an hour because we
did the
right thing. But at the 3rd minute, and the guy, when he pulled in, it was a nice guy. He didn't, he kind of looked at a little bit more, it was 3 of us standing there, and it was one of him, so he was a little bit more cautious. But he asked him, he said, what hour when did this happen? And he said, at 8:54. He was like, well, I ran out at 8:50, 8:51. He said, did you have like a monitor on when this was running? I was trying to get it. That's what my point of the story is. It makes it hard when you do have guys that are willing to pay, that aren't wanting to be bad actors in parking lots, that are getting notifications, say, hey, I'm going to be here a little bit longer. I need to re-up. Because somebody does own the property. Somebody is, they're paying for it. Capitalism's great. I have no problem with it. But here was a guy that got stuck or pinched for $75 trying to do the right thing, and it was 3 minutes.
Well, he actually did the right thing.
He did the right thing.
Yes.
But it was pinched at 3 minutes. Now, if this was a habitual violator that, that he's been in there for an hour or 30 minutes has gone by, and he's like, well, I'll get out there in a minute. Absolutely. The property owner has a right to say, wait, you're using my space and you're not paying for it. I totally get that. But I was just texting him a minute ago and asked him, it was a Krog City Market. It was 3 minutes that he missed the hour or he missed the time frame to re-up on his phone to get that extension. So anyway, I just want to make that comment that, you know, I'm interested in balance. I want to see balance, you know, happen, but it's very, very hard when you walk out to situations like that. I needed to get home. The other guy he was driving needed to get home, and this guy needed to get home. So we waited, and we didn't wait for an hour. So it was about 25, 30 minutes before the individual was able to get there. But that makes it, you know, that hurts the case, I guess you could say, in
And I
those
totally
type of
understand that, and
situations.
I'm gonna let my colleague here speak to that,
Absolutely.
'cause I think that's one of your properties.
Yeah, and I can speak to that.
And your name, please?
My name is Chip Schmelk. I'm part of the Georgia Parking Enforcement Coalition. I can speak to that. We're actually working with the company that used Park Mobile to try to resolve that issue because, yeah, that's right. So it's a convenient service, but from an enforcement side, all of our the only thing that they see is whether a vehicle is valid in the system or not. So we're working with Park Mobile to, when a vehicle does expire, it changes the color on the license plate and it'll remain there for a period of time after the parking has expired, so that would eliminate that issue. Because all we see, as soon as that parker's parking rights have expired, it immediately comes out of our queue. So we can't. So yeah, so we don't see it anymore. So all we see when we pull up a particular location and we're looking for vehicles that are valid in the system that have paid for Park Mobile, or paid Park Mobile, I should say, all we see is a license plate number. That's it, just a list of license plate numbers in alphabetical order, so it's easy for us to go through. So once a parker expires, that license plate is no longer on that list. So like I said, we're currently working with Park Mobile to change that so that we can see it. And then there's some type of period after the vehicle expires that it'll still show up in our system, but that it has expired, but it was recently registered in their system. Does that make sense? Okay.
3 minutes, that's pretty good, though. I'd like to
Honestly, it's just a timing thing. That's it. I mean, he might have been there 20 minutes later to audit the property. It's just a matter of timing. That's all. So.
Representative Collins?
Late is late. You don't show up. You don't show up 3 minutes late to vote. The bank closes at 5 o'clock. The post office closes at 5 o'clock. When the police tells you to stop and put your hands up, you stop and put your hands up. In our society, we have gotten away from that. No means no. Yes means yes. And it is what it is. That's all I have to say about that.
Any?
Be late. I don't want to be late to my response here. And I get that. I'm very much. I was actually thinking about that type of tracking system on another bill I'm working on. But the idea was he wasn't late. It took that long for that transaction. He got a notification that his parking was running out. And he was, hey, let me go ahead and re-up. I'm about to run out. It took that particular app the amount of time to transact that money exchange. So it was almost as if somebody was waiting there for it to ding. I understand late is late, but we're talking about legislation that there's a lot of frustration over. So late being late is grace. Remember you said the other day, my Bible talks about grace and forgiveness. I got that same Bible. So I want to make sure that we're talking about like a grace period, maybe 15, 20 minutes. Hey, you know, hey, notification coming in, you're late, you got 15 minutes to re-up. If not, you're going to get booted. It just almost seemed like, hey, it's ticking down, bam, this thing went on there, and it got booted. Before he could even say, hey, I'm a good actor, I want to get this money out there so I can continue having fun with my friends. So, yeah, and that's a help. That's a friendly kind of little sage advice of, in order to do the things you're asking us to do, you're going to be able to have to say to some of these customers that are good actors. Now, the ones that are leaving their cars out there, the ones that are just being derelict and negligent and on private property rights, absolutely. Tow them, boot them, do whatever they need to be done. I'm talking about those that are just trying to have a good time, and that little minute time frame are the ones I want to address.
Well, and if I may, sir.
Yes, sir. 2
points on that. One, I do agree. I mean, there has to be, I think, a little leeway there. There is a lag in that system on occasion. So, and we've experienced this. It's not something we're happy about, but when we pull our audit report off that, and it's just an app on the phone, it shows whether you're in or you're out, and if we're coming across, and that's it. So that needs to be addressed, or at least maybe with the electronic payment, maybe put a little grace period or a buffer in there, something reasonable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be 30 minutes or anything like that, but like a 10 to 15 minute window, and I would be acceptable with something like that. And I don't think that's a point that we would even try to argue. The other thing is, it should be known is, we don't set the parameters on any property we work for the rules. Okay, our client sets the rules. So we have lots where it's 1 hour parking or maybe 2 hour parking. And in those places, the operators, the people we work for, have a zero tolerance policy. They're like, hey, expired, it's expired, I want them booted right then. Okay, so we're just going by our contract there. We have other lots and other people that we work for that say, hey, they put in a grace period of whatever amount of time, so we run a double audit on the car. Just for that reason. And it just depends on the operator and the circumstances. So some are already in place, but the electronic payment, there is a delay there. We've come across this in our industry before. I would love it to be instant. It's not, but I kind of agree with you there. If you're trying to do the right thing and you're doing it within a few minutes, it should be no harm, no foul on that. So,
and listen, to Jay's point, that's a good point. Maybe a 10-minute alert he should have had on his phone. Hey, in 10 minutes you're going to expire.
that's something like Park Mobile, which is a very large company. That's probably something they could program into their system, so, to say, hey, parking expires in 15 minutes. You have to have this done by X amount of time, or you'll be in violation. All you got to do is change the text and when it goes out. I'm not an IT guy, but I guarantee these IT people can figure that out pretty easily.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Mr.
Seen
Chairman.
a couple lights buzzing. Nobody else. They've all cut off. Anybody?
Real quick, there is a 15-minute warning that the user gets before their parking expires from the Park Mobile side.
Okay.
Just like
I call it parish of judgment too.
We weren't drinking. They've been Bible study, so.
Okay, we have no further questions for you. I would like to say I'd appreciate if we could expedite it a little bit, as we always do. We got to be out of here by 5 o'clock. They're going to lock the door on us, and we got 6 more people to speak. So, if we can move along. Next up is Shane Dura, Premier Parking Enforcement. I think I butchered your last name, but
it's Dora. You
Dora,
were pretty close.
okay.
Yes, sir. So first of all, I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, for letting us speak. I actually have a letter from one of my, a notated letter he gave to me over the phone from one of our clients. He wanted me to read to you since he didn't have enough notice to be able to get here himself.
Could you speak up just a little bit?
Yes, sir. I
Okay.
apologize. So, as an Atlanta resident and local attorney who represents multiple parking companies, both where booting is and is not allowed, he wanted me to share with you a few of his thoughts today because he wasn't able to make it on such short notice. Booting is by far the most effective and customer-centric way in which his customers have to prevent theft on their properties by people not paying to park. All of their properties are paid parking lots. So he has clients that went to the extremes of adding speakers with, telling people what the rules and regulations are on the properties, and an example of signage and an example of a vehicle being booted on their property, and they still have issues on that property just as much as they do some of the other properties. So I'm sorry, I wrote all this while I was driving. Well, as he was driving, I was in the car. So, I was on the parking lot, I promise. So the company that he uses, my company, Premier Parking Enforcement, we use, as Jeff was saying, we wear cameras. All of our employees have uniforms. We're all trained. We work in the city of Atlanta, so all of our guys go through a background check as well, so to ensure that there are no predatory practices on their properties. He went on to say that he was a little troubled with the content of the proposed legislation, with allowing only for towing, and if you did need to boot a vehicle in an area where they couldn't get a tow truck in, you had to wait 30 days to be able to boot that vehicle. So that's a bit more of a grace period than he was looking for. So he finishes up to say that these are Atlanta-based companies, not national companies, that have been serving Atlanta for over 20 years. And he wanted to reiterate that booting is far and away the most effective way that they've found to make sure that theft is not occurring on their properties. And then a couple personal thoughts from me as well is, given enough time, I know that we're kind of short on time, but we easily could have probably filled this room with enough of our private property owners that would be against this bill, because it totally takes away their ability to use an enforcement tool for parking that they've utilized for years now. And then another thing that I want to bring up as well is the effectiveness of booting on private property is just as much as effective on private property as it is on public property. And I know that this bill goes out of its way to ensure that it doesn't affect anything on public property. But there are a lot of municipalities out there that do use booting as an effective parking enforcement tool at their disposal. So to take it away from private property owners, but still allow it to be used on public property, it kind of reiterates the point of how effective it is in deterring people from taking advantage of these private property owners. So that's all I have at this time. If you have any questions.
Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
I'm not good at reading these sometimes. The next one looks like Zach, M-E-R-G-H.
Yes, it's Zach Marsh.
Okay, secure parking enforcement.
Yes, sir. Thanks
Okay.
for allowing us the time to speak today. I know we're in a hurry. So most of what I was going to say has already been said. Just like to hit on a couple of things that most of the regulations that we would all like to see as well are already in place. Every jurisdiction I work, my guys are licensed or permitted. They all wear body cameras. We are insured. Another one of the former speakers said, we definitely accept credit cards, accept a lot of credit cards. It's already there, and we would like to see the bad apples taken out as well. It would only make our job easier. And so I think the problem with what I read is that this is definitely a ban. This puts us all out of business. And I think something that's missing is if we're not there watching the parking, I can't think of one of my clients who would actually be on site doing it themselves. So they would effectively have to hire a security company, which would cost who knows how much money, just to sit there and watch a parking lot and call the tow truck. It would be a large financial burden to them. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you very much. Next up is Matt Weathington, consumer.
My name is Matt Weatherington. I will be very brief. I am here in support of the bill. I'm going to address a couple of things very quickly. One is I want to thank the drafters of this bill for standing up for the consumers. I want to thank the co-sponsors in this committee for your time and consideration of this important issue. Unlike booters, tow truck companies are prohibited by statute from doing something called automatic monitoring. That's the problem you guys keep hearing about. That's the guy literally hiding in the bushes, sitting in a tower, waiting to prey on someone the moment that they violate one of the parking rules, and in many instances, even before they do. Now, this booting bill will not solve that problem at the end of the day by prohibiting surveillance. What it will do is it will say, we're not going to allow these predatory tactics to continue anymore. And in fact, there's a $1,000 fine for tow truck operators who engage in that type of surveillance. That's what the booting companies are here to ask for. They're here to say that they want to play by different rules than the tow truck operators and get special permissions, and that's what leads to these predatory practices. As far as towing being cheaper than booting, not so. That we have seen boots that go up to $1,800 for booting. Those people would certainly like to have had their vehicle towed by a licensed tow operator who had to play by real rules, instead of a booter who's going to sneak up on you in the middle of the night and put the boot on your vehicle. Now, you guys do not have to wait for someone to die to act on predatory booting. Since the last time that you had the opportunity to do something about booting, one person got shot, another person had got shots fired at him, and many other people have had guns held against them. You can do something now to stop that. I would encourage you, as these booting operators come up and tell you what good apples they are, you ask them, how many of your employees carry guns each day on the job, and how many of your employees have been arrested in the last year for gun crimes? Start there. Finally, as this argument about body cameras, the young man who was shot on Thanksgiving Day by a booting operator, that operator magically lost his body cam footage. I don't know what to say about that other than you guys have a chance to put a lot of this stuff to bed right here, right now. Finally, this argument that it's somehow 30 days before you can start booting in a parking lot, that's just a misreading of the bill, and I would encourage you guys to take another look at that. If you have any questions for me from a consumer's perspective, I'm happy to answer them.
I'd like to ask one right quick. Do you have any specifics about who was charged $1,800 for booting? What kind of circumstance was that, or?
Sure. It was, first of all, it was an illegal booting in DeKalb County after DeKalb County had turned around and said that we're going to limit the price of booting. Even with the law that they went and they lobbied for and said, we're going to play by the rules. The next week, they're out there charging $1,800, and when the police come on the scene, they're told, hey, this is a civil matter, get out of my business, private property rights. That's what they told these police officers. It took the city council getting involved to say, wait a minute, guys, you can't do this. We just went through this, and you're still out here preying on people. And it continues to happen. The idea that the majority of these bad apples are going to suddenly clean up their act if you just give them a slap on the wrist is not true. They're going to continue to go out there and prey on people. You've got to take action now, and you've got to pass this bill as it's currently written. There are some things that we can and should tweak in the bill, but this bill is good.
Okay, we got a couple questions for you. Number 18.
Sure. Be, Mr. Chairman. Where did the shooting happen?
Whole Foods parking lot in Buckhead. Young man goes out to the bars in Buckhead on Thanksgiving night, comes back to his car, sees a booter there. Sees a boot on his car, calls the booter. Booter comes. There's a dispute there. The booter ends up shooting the young man in the hip, fractures his hip.
Was there a police report?
Yes, there was. That man is currently facing felony charges, is my understanding.
The booter.
The booter,
employee
correct.
of the booter.
Correct. But they told the police a different story than what actually happened and got the poor victim also arrested. It took us getting involved and going and finding finding other video of what happened for us to actually get all those charges dismissed.
Was there a video camera?
Yeah, we found it. They lost their body cam that they were required to have on, but we were able to get surveillance footage from a nearby business.
And you said you said you were a consumer. Are you affiliated with a group, or?
I'm an attorney who represents these people who have been illegally booted. I'm here on behalf of the consumers.
Okay. Number 16.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You said that dealing with the 30 days, that it would be an improper reading of the legislation, that we would need to reread it. I'm reading lines 155 through 169, and I see actual notice, and this is on line 157, actual notice that the use of the vehicle and mobilization service is pending against such motor vehicle at least 30 days prior to the application of a device. I mean, that sounds like a 30-day wait to me.
So there are two things there, and I think the bill sponsor is probably in a better position to speak on that specific issue. One is it's per parking lot for getting this notification of where you can and cannot boot. Second, there's the provision for people who are being booted in their homes. And that's what I believe that's portion of the bill is speaking to. Their landlords are using this as a predatory debt collection tool. So you could be a tenant in a home, have a dispute with the HOA or a dispute with your landlord, and they could say, you know what, we're going to boot your car.
Well, it just says private property. I mean, so you could be parked in a parking lot over at Krog Street Market and have to wait 30 days to boot it because it says private property.
I would defer
it doesn't
to the bill
say,
sponsor
well,
for
I
that
mean, it's
specific.
line 147. It shall be unlawful, going back up to 146, it shall be unlawful for an operator or any partner, member, officer, employee, or contractor of such operator to immobilize vehicles on any private property without blah, 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 and then there's some exceptions on how they can, and that's where you get into the 30-day prior. So you could be over at Krog Street Market for 30 days before they can kick you off there or boot your car over there. And
47.
It follows subsection to line 152.
Right.
Resident. Line 152 is residential parking.
So again, what we're talking about
so,
here,
I mean, but even again there, so like, let's say, I'm living over during session during North Highland still. They give me one visitor parking pass to allow somebody to park. A friend comes over and wants to see me, they can park in visitor parking. Well, let's say I have a visitor that comes and visits me, But then I have another friend that comes over and they park their car for 30 days. They're taking up they're taking up space that other people that are renting in that apartment complex use for 30 days before they can have any problem.
Certainly.
The gentleman's correct in that the way that that he interpreted the bill was the intent of the bill. What we heard in subcommittee was that booting the car for visitors is actually kind of counterintuitive and extremely counterproductive to the overall goal, because I live in a building, 500 residents, we have 10 visitor parkings. They clamp it and that stupid car's sitting there for all day, and the idea is to try to get that vehicle removed and to actually fix the problem. So
and I think there's a lot to this bill I like the 65 capping at $65. I think I like that, and I've told you before in subcommittee and off the record that if you do cap it at 65, I would much rather somebody boot me than be required to get my car towed before I can even get a boot. And now I'm having to go out of my way to get the car from an impound and all that stuff.
And I agree with you, Representative. I think what you're going to find, though, is that the predatory action that we're seeing now, that's not going to really stem that.
So back to
I think I can address your concern.
because
pretty
then
clearly.
on top, hold on one second, because then on top of that, so let's say there is a visitor that's sitting there and just left the car parked for 30 days in the Highland Steel parking deck. And they can't do anything for 30 days, but then they also have to send a properly stamped envelope containing all this stuff to an address. How are they supposed to get certified mail? How are they supposed to go get all this information? What if it's a visitor, so it's not anybody that's living in the residency, but it's just a visitor's car parked there, and how are they supposed to go get all the information to pull tag? They're gonna have to pull the tag information and do all that. If they're not law enforcement, can they run tags to go to properly send a piece of mail to somebody? I mean, if you're not law enforcement, we got law enforcement in here. The only people that can do that is law enforcement.
And I guess my remedy would be they might call law enforcement and explain the situation to them, and I think perhaps they could do it then.
But that would be a civil matter.
Right.
They wouldn't get involved in it. They couldn't pull tag numbers without criminal suspicion. I mean, that's my understanding.
I'd like to reiterate 2 points for you. Number one is that what we're talking about is that specific provision of the bill is primarily designed to protect residents.
Then
there may be some outside edge issues where there's some area where perhaps we can trim off some of the edge on this as it pertains to visitor parking. But what we're trying to curb with this is individuals who have disputes with their HOAs and their landlords and then lose their cars over a rent dispute.
And then it should say something about, instead of all this, it should, if you just wanted to strike and say as a collection of debt, as a debt collection means of debt collection.
I defer to the bill sponsor to respond to that. Here's the other issue that I want to make sure you understand, and that is that the penalty for predatory towing and doing illegal acts involved in towing are heavy. There are severe penalties for towing a vehicle without complying with the statutes. As it stands right now, if you boot a vehicle in property, there is no recourse whatsoever.
And that's where I'm saying I think if we properly vetted this bill, maybe with the study committee that Representative Collins mentioned, that we could come to some kind of regulation where you could throw the hammer on an improper actor in the field and throw the hammer on them, and to where the point where there's so much that you're kicking them out of business because you're dropping a hammer on them. But I would like to ask the GBI here, how are tags run? Like, what are the guidelines and the regulations on running tags to get information? I mean, I know it's probably.
If you'd like the GBI to answer that, sure, I'd like to hear their answer.
Sorry, State Patrol. Sorry, my bad. My bad. Sorry, State Patrol.
First, it's protected information.
Yeah.
What you're describing is a non-consensual towing circumstance. That's private property. The vehicle's there. That's where the person can call to have that removed. You're talking about a booting issue, but just to go on a piece of property and start running tags, a private individual's not gonna be able to do that. If law enforcement is called there, there's a cause for them to be there. You know, if it's a potential, issue where a law has been broken, then they can look into the information. But just to run tags, that's protected information.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
You mean I can't call it a 10, 28, 29?
Well, that's, a 28 or 29 is done as a law enforcement action. So,
I'm just from the old days,
Yes,
so
sir.
thank you.
Thank you, Colonel.
If there are no further questions for me, I will sit down.
We got two more.
Yes, sir.
Number 13.
Thank you, Chairman, and forgive my tardiness. I just got out of my other committee meeting. I came in on the tail end of this. It's interesting, Chairman Clark just mentioned an analogy about Highland Steel. My wife was there about 2 minutes one day, and her car was booted inappropriately. And so, but I have a question. I'm real interested in an issue as it relates to, and this question may be best directed to Representative Dollar, but the issue I'm interested in is on private property. Where you have homeowners associations, et cetera. I don't hear about this in my part of the world, in Savannah, maybe going on.
Banned there.
But here, tell me, when you're going on someone's private property and booting their private property, tell me the degree to which that is happening, because I'd really like to understand that aspect of it kind of more fully.
Sure. The answer is it's happening every day. It is happening right this second. This is one of the primary economic drivers for booting companies. They contract with these HOAs, so the second that you are late on your rent or your HOA dues, then what they do is that here's the trick. The trick is that you bake in the parking fee with the rent. So when you've not paid your rent, you've necessarily not paid the parking fee. They go, well, we're not booting you for not paying your rent. We're booting you because you forgot to pay your parking fee. Therefore, you've lost your parking privileges. I'm very sorry. Once you bring your account current, then we'll take the boot off of your car. So it happens literally every day. If you go onto any of the booting operators, including those who are present in this room, go into any of their websites, what you'll see on the front page is, we boot for enforcement of HOA fees. You'll see it right there in plain black and white text.
Now, in fairness, those individuals, again, in the interest of being fair, Mr. Chairman, can I proceed?
Go ahead.
In the interest of being fair, those individuals may have well rented in a location and accepted that moving in, I suspect. Is that not correct? Or they may have purchased in a neighborhood where that was the case as well. Is that not correct?
That is not correct. And so sometimes that is true. Most times that is not. It's a case-by-case incident. So what this bill, though, does is makes it crystal clear that when you are going to do that, you do have to have it in the bylaws or in the HOA agreement. This provides clarity for everyone so they know what they're getting into.
That piece should be a no-brainer, but I will tell you this. If you go on to, in this country, in a free country, you go into a man's private property and you boot his private property, you're inciting him to wrath and you're asking for violence, and in my opinion. And so
It is a true
that's
public
inappropriate always in my wonderland. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Collins.
Mr. Chairman, the hour is getting late, and
It
again,
sure is.
I'd like to digress to a point I made previously. There are a lot of opinions and a lot of quote-unquote experts on this issue, and I would like to make a motion that we table this and form a study committee.
Let's hold off. We got one more. This is the only person that's had the opportunity to speak for. We've got one more, Mr. Robert Freeman. Is there anybody else has any questions for the attorney? Mr. Freeman? I think after we get done with Mr. Freeman, we're going to listen to a motion.
My name's Robert Friedman. I work with Matt Weatherington. I'm also an attorney, and I've been working on the booting, protecting consumers that have been unlawfully booted for the last almost 2 years now. I'll try and be brief. I'll touch on two things that came up here today, and one of which we managed to investigate during the 2-year investigation that I've been involved in. You'll notice that whenever this comes up, if they bring people who are not in the booting industry to speak in favor of booting, they will often bring property managers. Today you heard from Eagle Parking. There's a reason for that. I didn't understand the reason for that, so I investigated it. And I've been investigating this for 2 years, as I said. One of our defendants in one of the lawsuits is a different parking company. Their name is Sunshine Parking. As a result of the lawsuit, I ended up getting a copy of a lease that looked peculiar to me. In this lease, as they talked about the fact they're worried about property managers essentially having to pay additional fees to monitor their lot. Sunshine Parking manages a lot in Midtown, Georgia, near where I live. Normally, you would expect that if you manage a lot, that you would have to obtain a fee from the property owner. In other words, I am managing your lot and you are paying me a fee to manage your lot. That's how the ordinary universe of the world would work. However, in this popular lot in Midtown Atlanta, it works the other way. And I couldn't for the life of me figure out why. And when I say it works the other way, what I'm saying is that the property management company pays the property owner a fee for the privilege of managing their lot and insuring their lot and making sure the lot is run properly. That didn't make any sense to me. And they were a defendant in the lawsuit, and I thought for sure these people must have something to do with the booting at that particular lot, because this would just be a loss. It's not a pay lot. How is this possible? So I deposed him, and I deposed him under oath. And I found out the answer. Sunshine Parking receives fees from Advanced Booting Services for every boot put on a car in that lot. And he testified this under oath, and that's Mr. Phillips' company. And I asked him under oath, and I said, how are you getting this money? Isn't that you getting booting fees without being a licensed booting operator? And he said, no, it's a parking fee. And I asked him, are there parking fees at this lot? No. Are there valet fees at this lot? No. This is why. This is why property managers come out and speak in favor of booting. When they say that this is the most effective tool for parking, you got to take it with a grain of salt. Have I deposed Eagle Parking? No. I can't say for certain that they have the same arrangement, but like I said, I've got testimony under oath from Sunshine Parking, and I know exactly how this works, so it doesn't surprise me one bit to see Eagle Parking here saying that they love booting, and that booting is the best way to enforce parking, because there's a real good chance here that if you did testify under oath, or you did do a deposition, that there's a possibility here that that's what's going on with all of these parking companies, if it's happening with at least one of them. So, like I said, take the information from parking companies for what it is. I can't say they all operate this way, but I know for a fact at least one of them does. 2, they mentioned the fact that they're already regulated and that there are ordinances in all of these different counties and cities. Mr. Wetherington mentioned DeKalb County. That's an important thing to look at because this was recently passed, but it's the same in almost every county and city. People in the counties and cities do not have the manpower to regulate this. They will often pass these bills and they can't enforce them. And that's literally what happened in DeKalb County. They went to the media and they asked them, the person doing the booting for hundreds of dollars, point blank, why are you doing this? They just lowered the fee. Isn't this unlawful? And he said, well, I haven't registered with DeKalb County yet, so I can still boot for hundreds of dollars per boot. The police were called. DeKalb County Police. Nothing can be done. Civil matter. Sorry. This needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed now. There's been a lot of talk about a study committee and pushing this further back. We had that. We had that for a year. That was the study committee. This bill is a culmination of everything that everyone cared about at that time, and it's extremely well written, and I give it my full and complete support. If there's anything that needs to be changed, it's minor, and I think that can be done after it gets out of committee, and I urge you to vote on this bill here today. Lastly, I will say that they continue to talk about the fact that there are only a few bad apples and that they promise that they're going to fix all the problems with their industry if you just give them the time and have these study committees. We're still doing the same things we were doing last year. We complained last year and we told them this is not right. You shouldn't be booting people in their home for late rent, for late HOA fees. They seemed to say that, they didn't like that concept either, and they again pointed to the idea of bad apples. Still happening, same companies. Same thing, over and over again. Booting for late rent, booting for HOA fees. It happens where I live. It happens in my own building, in my home. If I'm late on my HOA fees, if I don't pay, some kind of parking decal fee or thing like that, I could be booted in the place where I live tomorrow. I urge you to pass this bill here today and move it along. Thank you.
We got one number 25 for one question, and then I'm gonna give the author opportunity to make some last comments and.
You ready? I have a question for the author of the bill, please. So, sir, you, I think I understand you to say that you worked on this last year, and I was in the subcommittee. This is not a question I posed to you then, but this was something that you worked through last year, and the folks involved had the opportunity to make some significant changes from then to now, or no?
I was not on the committee, but I monitored it. I had an interest in it. I was not an active participant in those negotiations, but or I guess those hearings. And The process was long, it was thorough. A number of people gave tremendous amounts of time to this issue.
May I ask one further question, sir? So I guess where I'm going with this is North Highland Steel was already brought up. There's a few folks that live there. Of course, just last session as well, somebody, I had to offer to give them a ride because there was a boot on their vehicle. And they're a resident. But needless to say, they still had to pay for the boot, So there's so many examples of all of us being caught in this. Has anybody noticed a decrease in behavior since we've already been studying this issue? Because I can say that I certainly have not. And I'm only in Atlanta 3 months out of the year. So you missed my subcommittee personal booting experience. I think many of us have those. So have we noticed a change? I guess that's my question. Has anybody been a participant to help through this situation, or is it going to have to be done here at the state level?
I don't have any numbers or studies. So much of this is underground. I can say that there has been no decline in the number of stories. But these are anecdotal. But there hasn't seemed to, they haven't magically stopped represented. Yes.
Number 16.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I expressed some of my concerns in study committee regarding the lines 33 through 40, where we're mandating that private companies have to call towing companies first. We've talked. I just don't think that there's, just in private conversations with you and in that committee meeting, I don't think that you're open for being amendable to removing that section. Again, as a consumer, that if we do the rest of this bill, it drops the fee to $65. If I'm parked illegally, I would much rather have to pay the $65 to get the boot removed than to have to go through the rigmarole of going to an impound and paying even more money that way. And I keep hearing about how towing is regulated. I would like to take time to actually figure out a way to properly regulate the booting industry, because there is a problem. There is. I don't think anybody on this committee would deny the fact that there is a problem. I just don't. Again, with the 30-day notice and the issues of not being able to send the letter because you can't get the information, because you can't run the person's tag if they're not a resident of that facility. So I do have problems with the bill. I wish we could try to work on something to try to get it, because it was not a study committee. It was people who hate booting meeting with people to try to come up with a way to punish booting. And so that's not properly regulating, but I digress.
Okay, I think we're beating a dead horse now. I'd like to give the author just a quick opportunity. I think we got 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, I think most of it's been covered. The point, if somebody's parked where they're not supposed to be parking, I think it seems counterintuitive to do the one thing that's going to ensure that car stays there. To Representative Gravely's point, anybody who's been in the situation, it becomes very apparent to you very quickly, and the towing operator makes there's no mistake in the fact that they have you. They have you. They may as well have reached in your pocket and grabbed your keys, and they know it. And you're going to do whatever you need to do to get those keys back. There's a problem out there. This is not something that was thrown together in haste. This is, I think it's a good bill. I've been overwhelmed with the amount of support. I've never dropped a bill and had members just come up to me going, "Hey, I really like your bill." But that's been the case with this piece of legislation. I understand that there are concerns. You know, that when we drafted this, the 30-day, your reading of that was not the intention. I'm happy to work with you on that. I'm happy to work with you on other parts of the bill as this thing moves forward. You know, with us running up against crossover day, I'm a little hesitant to postpone this part, and I'm certainly not the Speaker of the House and authorized to, you know, just issue study committees. If you are a representative and you can just create study committees, then I'll come see you. But I think that the Speaker is the only one who can make that call. Thanks, Jay. And Chairman, that's really all I have.
Okay, I think that's enough. I've learned a lot here today. I know a lot about towing from my prior experience, but this booting, we don't do a whole lot of booting at Route 1 Rankin, Georgia. So it's been eye-opening to me, but I'd open it up for a motion, and I think without explanation, we all understand how the process works about making motions and what happens along the way if we make a motion for one thing, or if it fails, and so everybody.
I can't say though, as this thing moves along, I do promise to work with members to perfect it.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Does anybody have a motion? Okay, you're making an official motion that, okay, we have a motion to table it and ask for a study committee. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? Okay, everybody that's in favor, raise your right hand. One. Tabling it. 1, 2, 3, 4. All opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The motion fails. Do we have any other motion? We have a motion to pass. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? No. Let's count them again. Everybody for it, raise your right hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All opposed? 1, 2, 3. Motion carries. We're adjourned.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee.